Hello. I'm Victoria. It's a pleasure to have you here. We're going to talk today about a very important topic, how to differentiate yourself from competitors. I'm very glad to bring this masterclass to you. I'm the founder of the Phoenix Brand Consultancy. The Phoenix Brand Consultancy is the only ever brand consultancy that is determined to help diverse founders. So we have made it our goal to help women and non-binary founders grow their startups. And we do this with strategic brand building, which is a favorite thing to do. And we also do it with empathetic entrepreneurship. And I have learned in the past that especially for women and non-binary founders and all kinds of people that are treated as minorities and are underserved in business, it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of fighting. It's fighting the bias, fighting the bullshit. We start off business, with a different package. So it takes a lot of courage for us to do this, and it takes a lot of vulnerability, and also it takes a lot of empathy to work not just with investors, but also with probably the employees you're going to be hiring, your style of leadership you're going to develop. So this is a bit of the secret sauce I'm working with here at the Phoenix Brand Consultancy. Strategic brand building is the strategy and the core of what we're doing, but also empathetic entrepreneurship. And together, I'm convinced they make up the winning potion for a startup. So let's dive into today's topic. Today we're going to talk about differentiation. In the beginning, I'm going to show you some data, some statistics about differentiation and what is there to learn from us, from other startups' failure. What can we take home for us? And then we're going to talk about how to actually find your competitors, right? There's a question I received a lot here in the beginning is, Victoria, I don't even know who my competitors are. And that is a great question. I'm going to show you some frameworks of how to get there, how to find your competitors. Then it's going to get practical. We're going to talk about methods for differentiation. I'm going to show you some things I would advise you not to do for differentiation and some winning strategies for differentiation. And then in the fourth step, I'm also going to show you how to apply it with a fake brand I created. And I'm going to show you how we're going to differentiate that fake brand in the market and how it stands against its competitors. All right. So let's get started. You've probably heard about this, right? I'm going to keep showing it to you, not because I'm cruel, but 9 out of 10 startups fail. That is the truth as it stands today. And we don't just look at this and cry ourselves to sleep. No, we take this for our motivation to become the 1 out of 10 that actually makes it. And in order to do that, we take the learnings from those failed founders, from those people who have, attempted it and have failed before. And we take those learnings and apply it to your business so we don't do the same mistake twice. So when we look into why those founders failed, there's an analysis here by Fortune that looked at postmortems. So a lot of failed startups write a postmortem after they failed to explain to investors and their customers why it is they think they failed or what the evidence there was. And when you look at those numbers, you find that 19% of failed founders said they got outcompeted. That's quite a lot, right? Last webinar, there's still a recording for that. If you're interested in that topic, we talked about the number one reason. We talked about no market need. This is the most common reason for startups to fail. And if you're interested in that, I can send you the recording for the first masterclass. We talked about how to find your startup's ideal product market fit, so you don't die of that reason. But today I want to talk about the other reason, the getting out competed. What does that even mean? And what is the opposite of getting out competed? The opposite of getting out competed is differentiation. It is what you can do better or differently from the alternatives. And we do differentiation not just for the sake of it and because it's fun to have like a USP. When people ask you about that, we do it for basic survival. If we're not differentiated from the competitors, your ideal customers won't know what is different about you, what is better about you, and therefore won't choose you in buying situations. And that is pretty much the beginning of the end for you. So we need differentiation. We need to communicate what the benefits of your brand, of your company are in relation to your competitors, to the alternatives. And we also do it on the positive end for margins. It's a beautiful thing, right? There is proof for differentiation. If you ask your accountant about your gross margins and they say a wonderful portion, like 60% gross margins, then you know you have a differentiated brand. You have achieved that. Look, example for Birkin bag. That is one of those brands that is highly differentiated in the market. You would spot it like meters away. You see the ads and you know Birkin bag. Oh, that's this luxury handbag, and they have gross margins of 60% because they are highly differentiated in the market and they clearly communicate what is different about them compared to the alternatives. So we don't just do differentiation for survival. This should, of course, should be the first thing we're working on, but we also do it for margins. This is where we strive to go. So highly differentiated brands have the power to capture significantly more volume. They can command a price premium. This is the margins beauty I talked about. And they have much greater potential to gain value share in the future. And this is where we want to go. And also a word of caution, if you do not do this work, if you do not define your brand, then your competitors will do that for you. And you will not like what they have to say about you. So it's better be you that does that work of differentiation and defining your brand. All right. So now that we looked at the numbers, I think we got moderately motivated to work on the topic of differentiation. It's time to get started on research, how to find your competitors so we can actually even find out how we can differentiate from them, right? If we do not know what our competitors are, we're like fighting in a dark room. We do not know who's in the arena with us. So we have to enter this, metaphorical arena and look around and see who else is there, who else is fighting for the time, attention, and money of the customers. So we know what makes us different from them. So what is our competition? I ask this question a lot when I work with founders and entrepreneurs. I go in, we have a first call, and of course the topic arises and we talk about competition. And what I usually get from founders is a list of rivals. And they send me like five or 10 similar looking companies and think that those are their competition. But this is actually a little close-minded to the topic. These are just similarities. These are just similar companies to use. It does not mean that these are actually your competition. Because if you look at market orientation in the real way, you have to look at more like what are the alternatives to what you offer? What are the jobs to be done for your ideal customers? And that's when we get to real competition. A better word is probably alternatives. If you try to think about it, try to, whenever you say competition, try to replace it with alternatives in your mind and see if that still makes sense. So when we look at, when we work in a market-oriented way, and I highly encourage you to do that, it's not about you, it's about your customers, right? And then you talk to them and you find out what is it that they need, what are the alternatives to the solution you're using, and that's how you get to competition. And if you look at it, for example, Coca-Cola. What is their competition? A lot of you would say, oh, that's Pepsi, right? They're rivals. They're always competing. Yes, I would agree to that. But what is also competition to Coca-Cola is coffee, right? The question is, what is the job to be done of that Coke that the person wants to buy there that moment? Is it to be awake? Then the alternative to Coke is also coffee. Or a cold shower if you're crazy like that, right? There is competition out there that is not an obvious rival, is not an obvious similar company to yours. Or if you look at life insurance as a business, right? What is an alternative to life insurance? Of course, there are other life insurance company, but also it competes with a gym membership, right? If you do feel healthy in your life, you feel like you achieve longevity because you work out a lot, you're very healthy in your body, you might not even be interested in a life insurance, right? There's a not obvious alternative in the market for them. And also when you look at streaming services, right? For example, Netflix. What are Netflix's competitors? Of course, there's HBO Max and Amazon Prime and all the obvious competitors that are important to know about in the market. But for your customers' time, attention, and money, there's also other things that are competing. For example, an early night in. What is the alternative to watching Netflix to them? And this is really the mind shift that I encourage you to do here. See your business from their eyes, from your customers' eyes, and ask, what is the job to be done alternatively to what it is that you offer, right? And ask what alternatively could they be doing instead of using your product, your brand, your service. What else is there? Is it maybe a do-it-yourself version of what it is that you offer? Is it not doing anything at all? That sometimes is an alternative for people. And find out what else would they do if they didn't have you. What else would solve their need? Would help them with their frustration? Would get them where they want to go? And that's how we actually get a better picture of competition that is not just obvious rivals and similar companies to you, but also what else is in their realm and is important to them. And that, I think, is one of the biggest mind shifts that I encourage you here to do, and that's going to help you moving forward. So how do we get there? Obviously, we talked about a market-oriented approach, about being really driven by the market, really understanding their pains, needs, and frustrations. And for that, you will have to talk to them. I'm not going to give you the huge research guide I did last time in the masterclass. If you're still interested, there's a huge research guide there. I'm just going to do some cherry picking here for the few things that I find important for this very topic. So customer interviews. I would highly recommend you to do these in the very beginning of your venture, and generally always, right? You can schedule that in your calendar, do monthly customer interviews with them. And honestly, you don't really talk much about your product in these interviews. It's not really about you. You go ahead and you meet them and you find out who they are. You find out what they're struggling with. You find out their past experiences with the category. Now, for example, what was your experience with other soft drinks? What was your experience with other life insurances? What has worked for you in the past? What frustrated you about this? How would you have liked it to be dealt, right? Go into their experience and find out what are their frustrations with the category. What do they want to get out of it? What do they want to achieve? And who they are right now, right? As an identity, how they see themselves and who they would like to become. And then you get a deeper understanding of who they really are. And in these customer interviews, are normally qualitative research. You do them on the phone or on a Zoom call, like we are right now. You can also do them in live, real person. That's possible too, right? And when you do these interviews, you will find out what the competition is. You will also find out what the alternatives are. You ask them, right? What was your past experience with life insurance? And then you ask them, so what was the life insurance you had before? And then you ask them about that experience. Or also you ask them, so you told me that your most pressing need was feeling safer for the future. What else is out there that makes you feel safer for your future? And you ask them, what is the alternative to the jobs that is to be done? And that's how you find out what the competition is in a very broad and, let's say, discovery kind of way. You don't give them options and ask them to cross them off in the beginning. Right? This is qualitative research. You ask them and take whatever comes up for your research. And this is always an ideal starting point for any type of research is qualitative research. And with that knowledge, we can go into something else that is one of my favorite tools to use, is keyword analysis. Here we look at competition and alternatives in a more quantitative way and gain some insights there. Normally, if you are a publicly traded company and are in an established business, data about market share is easy to find. You can also just hire an analysis company that does that for you. And when you are a small business, when you work in an emerging market or for an emerging category, chances are it's going to be very, very difficult for you to get data about competitors and market shares. So what you can do, and it's one of my favorite tools, is instead of using a share of market, you use a tool called share of voice. And actually, marketing researchers have found that share of voice and share of market are very, very similar. And you can take it as a crutch to understand what is this market, what are the important players, who owns what portion of the market currently. And in order to do that, you have to look at keywords. So share of search means search engine searches. And it's a great tool. It's a great vehicle to understand what is the market need. How often do people search for this compared to searching for that? And that's how you get an understanding of the demand side of things. What do people want? What is actually in their realm? What are they looking for? And not just in the category, but also the brands that you can compare them. And in order to do this kind of share of search analysis, you have to first go really broad and look at the category. You have to collect popular queries for your category. I usually use the Google Keyword Planner as a tool for this, but there are also other free or semi-free tools out there. Ubersuggest, for example, is a great tool I can recommend you for keyword analysis. So you go in and, for example, you look at furniture stores. If that is, for example, the business you're in is furniture, then you look at furniture brands. You look at furniture alternatives. Which is the best furniture company, which is the best furniture brand, and you narrow down searches for the category. And you don't just have to come up with these yourself. Normally, Google already gives you a suggestion when you type in furniture brands, like, oh, similar searches. And then you narrow it down and have a great pool of keywords in the category of the business you're in. And then you look at the pages that people usually go to when they search for that. So when they search for a toothpaste brand, what are the top 5 to 10 domains people then click on when they looked for that category? And that's how you get closer to competition. You create a list, right? Okay, so for toothpaste brands, these are like the top 20 toothpaste brands people usually click on. And that's interesting. Okay, you already have a bit of an understanding. And then you enrich that data with traffic. So you don't just look at how often do people search for that, what is the search volume for this keyword, but also what is the monthly traffic for this brand, for this domain. And that's how you get a great understanding of how the market looks like. So, for example, you are in toothpaste business. You have a startup there. You have an amazing product that's going to disrupt the market of toothpaste. And you look at your competitors and you list them. You found 20 maybe toothpaste competitors, and you put in an Excel sheet what their search volume is for their brand name compared to the search volume for your brand name. And that's how you can calculate your proportion of the market share. For example, then you find out, oh, I only own 2% of share of voice for the toothpaste market, but there's a really strong competitor out there that owns like 40% of share of voice for toothpaste brands. And that's a great tool and a great vehicle you can use that's almost entirely for free. It's completely for free if you only use the Google Keyword Planner for this to get to this data. It's not going to be perfect, right? It's just searches. It's not real life. And depending on the industry people might not search for your term too much, but it's a great vehicle to get to an understanding of what different players are out there and how they're competing currently and how your brand stands against them right now, and set a goal, right? If you look at this at the very beginning, if you are at an early stage of your startup and do this at the very beginning and find out to date that this is the share of search, and your goal is in 2 years, your share of search for your brand wants to be this and there, right? And you can use it as a metric for you, as a KPI. This is where we want to go. This is how we find out that we're actually making it the market. We're regaining market share, we're gaining traction. Because when people start looking for you, this is actually when you know you have made it, right? You have established a connection to them, you're part of their world, and it reflects then in the data. So these are 2 tools I recommend you using: a qualitative tool open customer research, a semi-structured interview. Do it on Zoom, do it on the phone, just do it, always do it constantly. Don't lead them anywhere with your question. No closed-ended questions in qualitative research, always open-ended question to find out what are their needs and frustrations are, their expectations and their experience with the category. And that's how you get an understanding about how they see it in their eyes, what their alternatives, what they think competitors are. And then you can dig deeper with a quantitative tool, keyword analysis, to understand what is the supply and demand in the market, how often do people look for that category, and when they look for the category, who do they usually end up with? And these are also your competitors and the alternatives for you. All right. So I hope that has been helpful so far, looking at not just why differentiation is important, survival, margins, but also how we can find your competitors, qualitative research, keyword analysis as a quantitative research. And now we're going to look at some different methods for differentiation. Now it's going to get all kinds of exciting. Summer, you have been here for the last masterclass too. You remember this slide, the others don't, so I'm going to explain it to all of you again. So this is one of the key moments of strategy here, right? If strategy is one thing, then this is what it is that you see here. It is called the 3 C's, and it's a Venn diagram of overlapping bubbles here. You see a company, customer, and competition. And in the middle, there's the holy grail of brand strategy, it's positioning. This is where we want to end up. So we want to be where those things align and overlap. So we want, it should be something that your brand can authentically own, that your ideal customers increasingly want, and something that you can do better or differently from the alternatives. And when all those 3 align and overlap, that's where you find positioning. This is where you find clarity. This is where you find direction. This is where you win every pitch and win over every customer, because you're just crystal clear on what you stand for and how you're going to achieve this. And there's interesting things to learn from this graph too. For example, where company and customer align, this is where we find product market fit. This was the topic of the last masterclass. Today we're talking about where customer and competition overlap. This is where we find differentiation. So differentiation, in other words, is then what your ideal customers increasingly want, and it overlaps also with is it something that you can deliver better or differently from the alternatives? And when those 2 overlap perfectly, this is where we find differentiation. And the thing there in the middle does not necessarily have to be one thing. I highly encourage you it not to be just one thing. And I'm not a huge fan of USP as the concept of it just being one singular thing that differentiates you, because it's going to be very, very easy for competitors to come in and steal it away from you. And what are you without that? Then nothing, right? It's better to have it a little richer. What is there in the middle? That can be rational pieces. That can be an emotional association, but it can also sensory pieces that differentiate you from the competition. So what is a rational differentiation is, for example, you're faster, you're cheaper, you're more durable, right? These are all rational arguments that come to people's minds when they think about you in relation to your competition. Then there are emotional associations. For example, it makes me feel more peaceful, or that's the exciting one, right? It excites me compared to the other ones. That is an emotional differentiation. But there's also sensory differentiation. For example, that's the blue one, right? Oh yeah, I remember that brand, that telecom brand. That's the blue one, or that's the one with the chipmunk. Sometimes people remember like just parts of the logo or any piece of distinctive brand assets, we call them, right? It can be a logo, it can be a jingle, it can be your brand color. So differentiation also happens on a sensory level. And I highly encourage you here not just to, double down on the rational parts, because I know founders have the tendency to go very rational and very head heavy on this topic of differentiation, and think of all kinds of rational pieces that are different from your product or your company. but it's not just rational. Humans are not robots. We're emotional feeling beings and we're highly irrational. And our purchase decisions are driven very irrationally. So also think about emotional pieces that differentiate you from the competition and sensory differentiation. And how to achieve that, I'm going to go into that very soon, but just to see the framework here. So differentiation happens where customer and competition perfectly overlap. This is where we find differentiation. All right, let's start with what I recommend you not to do. And I hope I'm not going to break many hearts here, but in 0 out of 10 times when I talk to founders, I would recommend competing with the market leader. It is pure insanity for a small business. I have to say that. I would not recommend you to do this. If you are in the furniture business, like you are, Modi, don't try to become the new IKEA. It's not gonna work, especially when you're a small business. You're not venture backed, you're bootstrapped. It is very, very difficult for you. I call it the David versus Goliath version, right? The startup are setting out to become the next Amazon. Um, it's gonna be so difficult. You're small, competing in a market that always favors the big ones. This is how our market structure works, and they can easily outcompete you. They have the means, they have not just the monetary resource, but also the human resources to whatever nice little feature you come up with you think is the differentiator to just easily swallow that and copy that. So it's very, very unlikely to win head on against the market leader in any business. This is unfortunately the market dynamics we're in today. This is very unlikely to work. So let's not do that. Okay. So what else would I not recommend you to do? And this is probably where I break the most hearts. I very, very rarely would recommend inventing a subcategory of the market. And I get the idea, right? There's all these like wonderful books about the blue ocean strategy and category creation and like saying it's very difficult to compete in an existing market. And I agree with that. But then just come up with your own category and sell that to people and you will never have competition. And I know it sounds tempting. And when you actually manage to pull it off, it is amazing. But it's very, very difficult to pull that kind of thing off. So in order to invent a subcategory of a market, you really have to do a lot of research on how the market is evolving, how products are evolving, and how technology is evolving. And instead of selling your product and differentiating your brand, you sell the problem to them. You have to convince customers that this is a real need and have to sell them on the problem. And this will take a while. So then they go in and buy your product. It's a different type of approach. For example, Marley Spoon. You know Marley Spoon? They invented the subcategory of cook at home meal boxes, right? That has not existed before. And they have invented a new type of subcategory and have to sell people on the problem of, you actually need a cook at home meal box. And by the way, we're the only ones doing it. Well, they used to be the only ones doing it. And this is how they gain market share. This is how they convince their customers then. But it's extremely expensive. And generally only big and venture-backed companies with very deep pockets and very mature and very patient investors can pull that kind of thing off. And it's also important for you to know that on average, it takes 6 to 10 years for a new category to be established. Do you have the time and the money, 6 to 10 years, to wait around until that category is established? And some do, right? I don't say it's impossible. Some do have the time and money to wait around and convince people and do all kind of education on the new category. But it's very difficult to do that kind of thing. So this is also not really the strategy I would recommend you to use to go forward. On the other side, there's good news. There are strategies I would recommend you doing. And this is like the 1, 2, 3 punch of what I want you to do for differentiation. I want you to start with niching down. I want you to ladder against the competition, and I want you to aim to look and sound differently from the competitors. This is what you need to do in order to survive. This is what you need to do not to get outcompeted in the market. I'm going to go deeper into all three of those. So niching down is the preferred way. This is what I recommend 9 out of 10 times when founders come to me, how they would go about the market, how they find differentiation. I would, 90% of the times I would recommend niching down. Most people come to me and have a focus that is just way too broad. Like, oh, I want to serve everyone. Everybody should have the wonderful benefits of my brand and my company. When I ask who they're targeting, oh, we're targeting everyone. It's just so amazing. It's going to be very, very difficult for you to do that. You need to focus, narrow your focus, niche down, and find razor sharp focus on a specific type of customer segment that is currently underserved in the market. This is what we're doing. So it needs some research. Of course, it needs an understanding of the market and to find out where there is potential, where is a customer segment that is currently underserved, that has a specific unmet need in the market. And how can you perfectly match that with who you are as an entrepreneur, of who you are as a founder, of what it is that drives you, how you have come about, founding your business, what is that drives you, what are the core competencies at your company, and then you perfectly match these, right? This is product market fit. Talked about this before. So for niching down, you have to have a great understanding of the market and how it's emerging and what their needs, wants, and frustrations are, and if they're currently met. And you have to have a great understanding of who you are and what makes up your company. And then you match them and you find an ideal target market that is very, very specific and precise. And it also means that you have to be very counterintuitive sometimes. Niching down and finding a niche means going against everything that is cliche in your category. So if there's anything that is like cliche in your company, for example, B2B software, right? And you look at B2B software and it's all like blue and there's always people with suits and it always feels very serious and tight. And you have to identify whatever is cliche about the category you're playing in. Summer, I know you're playing in the e-commerce category, right? Have to think about what is cliche about shopping. Identify those. Talk to people. Like, what comes to your mind when you think shopping, right? And identify all those cliches and decidedly go against them to satisfy only the needs and wants of your niche. And you will know them so well. You know everything that drives them. You have talked to them. You constantly talk to them. And they are very special as a subsegment, right? And that's the wonderful thing about communities and smaller groups of people. They flock around each other because they find like, oh, you're one of us, right? They find each other and they encourage each other and they recommend things to each other. Word of mouth, for example. This is how you grow. This is how the beauty of niching down happens. A lot of founders I talk to are very nervous when I talk about niching down. They're very scared of narrowing down their scope because they think like it's not going to be as successful. Whereas my experience is it's the only thing that's going to work for you. If you try to please everybody and compete in a market that is already crowded and go out there non-differentiated, like just like everybody else out there and try to be everything to everybody, you're not going to make it and you're going to disappoint them anyways. So how about you decidedly disappoint a big sum of them and try to really, really satisfy a few of them. And that's how you grow. And when you have successfully conquered that niche after a couple of years with amazing community building and the first bit of funding, and then you can still grow from there, right? There's potential to grow out of the niche, to go to adjacent niches and expand from there. But this is really the way I would want you to go about this. An example here is Liquid Death. I don't know if you know about that company. They are actually just canned water. But they have found a niche, right? If you look at, the graph here and you look at a very broad focus, these are all the bottled and canned water companies. They speak to everybody, right? Everybody drinks water. And then you found Liquid Death. They also found a really cool name, I find. And they have specialized in water for very health conscious teens and young adults that are part of a subculture. They're just like more like punk, more like against everything, but they still want to drink water because they're health conscious. And they found this perfect niche that's still very, still big, right? It's not everybody, but it's still a very big niche, and found the perfect positioning, the perfect differentiation, the perfect visual assets to communicate why they are for them and how they can compete in a very, very saturated, very competitive market. So that's number one of what I would recommend you to do. Then there is a really great method you can use to differentiate yourself from competition, and that is laddering. So laddering is an attempt to deposition a competitor by highlighting one of your strengths, which just happens to be one of your competitor's weaknesses. So this way you cast a positive light on you while also casting a negative light on them. It's a method that is born in politics. Politicians use it all the time, especially in America. Presidential candidates usually find the weak spot of their opponent and take it and turn it into their strength in their positioning. So what Apple, for example, did in the realms of differentiation, they took a weakness of Google and Meta. Meta back then with Cambridge Analytica was still called Facebook, and they used one of their apparent weaknesses, is their negligent selling of data and usage of data, and turned it into one of their strengths. It was not the obvious choice, right? If you think about them, they're all in the software business. They're also in the hardware business, but you don't think that like the main business is privacy, right? It's just like an adjacent thing. But still, Apple has found the perfect angle here to use something that is their opponent's weak spot and has turned it into one of their strengths. Right in the middle of the Cambridge Analytica scandal, Tim Cook went out and said privacy is a basic human right, and laddered successfully against their components as the ones who actually do it right. And by constantly accentuating and emphasizing that Apple is a privacy company, they also communicate that the others are not, right? We are the ones about privacy, the other ones are not. This is their weak spot, this is our strength. Or there's also in the food and beverage, there's Bud Light. I don't know if you drink light beer, but apparently a lot of Americans drink light beer, and they were aiming to differentiate themselves from Miller Lite and other light beers. So what they found is that those use corn syrup to sweeten their beer. And it's not the most important thing, you'd say, right? If you think about beers and corn syrup, I don't know, it can be a topic, right? But they made it a topic. So they found a weakness in their competitors and have made a huge campaign about we are the ones who don't use corn syrup. It has become a huge thing in TV and advertising and the packaging. It says on the label now that they're the ones without corn syrup. They just use, like, let's say, a small weakness of their competitors, but still have successfully laddered against it to say, like, oh, we're not that, we're that. We're actually the better, different version of this, the superior version of light beers. So that's something that can work for your startup too. Right? If you have identified then competitors and look at their weak spots, how can you turn your competitors' weak spots into your strength? How can you communicate that you're the polar opposite of that? And the amazing thing about that is you don't have to constantly then address the negative thing, right? But just saying you're the good thing, it is intended that you are not the weakness. You are not your competitor who doesn't do it well. It's a nice piece of communication, a nice piece of strategy that you can use. All right, and let's go to number 3. What else can you do in order to differentiate your startup successfully from the competition is to look and sound differently. I know I talked about this a little bit before, and sensory differentiation is what marketers call distinctiveness. There's a bit of a war going on between marketing researchers. What is more important? Is it differentiation? Is it distinctiveness? Is it more important to have some rational and emotional communication and pieces in your brand that differentiate you, or is it more important to look and sound differently? And it used to be that most marketers and most entrepreneurs thought that differentiation is everything. And there was a time when the research turned around and they found amazing research that actually it might just be enough to look and sound differently, to offer the exact same thing, but look and sound differently, do it frequently and do it consistently, and you might as well be able to gain market share, to grab customer preference. And it's interesting, right? It's interesting to use. We're now in a time of moderation where researchers agree, you probably need a bit of both. You need some actual emotional and rational differentiation, and you also need distinctiveness, which is looking and sounding differently. So in order for you to win out there with your venture, with your startup idea, you need to do both. You need meaningful differentiation, and you also need distinctiveness. So, what are distinctive brand assets? What are these things we're talking about? We're talking here logos, we're talking slogans, typography, packaging, jingles are actually an amazing piece of distinctive brand assets. They are highly differentiated. People are able to sing jingles in the middle of the night. That's how well established they are and represented to them in their brains. And yeah, so what is it when you're distinctive? When you are distinctive, it means that your brand looks unmistakably like you, and it really jumps out to them. They don't just recognize your brand, but they can also tell it's your brand, right? They don't just say, oh, I've seen this before, but they also see, oh, and I know it's that brand. So we call these two parts fame and uniqueness in research, and these both make up distinctiveness. So fame means being well known. The element must be recognized by most of the public to understand that this is part of the brand. And then there's also uniqueness. They don't just recognize it. They don't just say, oh, I've seen this before, but they can also attribute it correctly to the name of the brand. So not just saying, oh, I've seen this shade of red. I know this, but to also say, I know it's Ferrari. Then you have both. Then you have both fame and uniqueness. This is where ideally where we want to be as a brand. And in order for you to do that, you needed to do it consistently and you need to do it frequently to get there in the representation of that lines. And here's an example. There's Mr. Peanut. So in order for Mr. Peanut to succeed, most people, when you show them the picture of Mr. Peanut, they say, oh, I know that one. That's Mr. Peanut. So you can say, oh, yeah, okay, fame. Most people recognize Mr. Peanut. And then when you ask them, what brand does Mr. Peanut belong to, most of them correctly identify its planters. And then you also achieve uniqueness. And this is when you know you have found a winning distinctive brand assets, a winning logo, a winning color, a winning jingle, a winning slogan. All these pieces can be distinctive brand assets, and these can successfully differentiate you from the competition. And I know it's a bit of a bleak truth, to be honest, because you think it takes all this rational effort, all this R&D work to differentiate your product from the competition, and then hearing that if you look and sound differently, consistently and frequently, that might just do the trick as well. It can be a little frustrating, maybe because the other part is so much work. But take it as an opportunity, right? Take this knowledge and take it with you and combine it with the beautiful benefits of meaningful differentiation to create a winning brand. All right. So now that we looked at the framework, I want to give you a practical example of how to apply this for a fake startup. And then you can also in your mind do this with me and think about your brand and how you would apply this for your brand. So we have Scooti. Samar, you might remember Scooti from last time. This is a fictional e-scooter company. So none of this is real. I invented all of this. Don't sue me over this, please. So there's Christina B. She is the founder of Scooti. It's just another e-scooter startup. She's from southern Germany. This is where she's rooted in, close to mountains and forests. It's where she lives and has a great factory for rubber wheels, and decided to turn it into an e-scooter company because everybody makes e-scooters nowadays. So why shouldn't she be one of the e-scooter companies? And that's how she went into the market for the first 3 years after founding Scooti. They advertise it, Scooti, as the safe and fun way to commute. Christina really thought that commuting is a big piece of the work here, because a lot of people in Germany live in rural parts of the countryside, and then they need to go into bigger cities for work. So she thought, wouldn't it be amazing to use an electric scooter to commute to work and do it in a safe way? And that's how she founded Scooti, the e-scooter company. But Scooti has run into some problems after 2 years. They find that actually it's not picking up really well. And they're not hitting the revenue targets. They're also not hitting the app downloads they wanted. When they talk to customers, they did not really seem very excited about Scooti. So some things aren't working. And that's why she decided to do the wonderful work of brand strategy and research to find out what's going on and to go deeper into differentiation. So what Christina did in the past, and this is what we did in the last masterclass together, is we niched down. We niched down her company. She used to advertise to all Germans. This was her targeting for her ads, for her billboards. This is when we talked to her. She said, oh, actually, everybody should have Scooti. So she realized after a while that this might not be the perfect product market fit here. It's too broad. So we went more specific, and in the end found the perfect match between her company and what customers really want, what they told us in the qualitative research. And what we found in quantitative research is that we narrowed it down to advertising and marketing Southern Germans. So we niched it down geographically, applied a filter here. We also applied an age filter, over 30. We've seen a business opportunity here. We've seen that people over 30 are underserved in that market. And then we have made it even more specific, those who look for outdoor adventure. This is the perfect match of our company and what customers want. It's a niche, it's an opportunity, and this is where Scooti decides to play. So that's what has already happened. Then this is where the work of differentiation now comes in. We have to find the competitors. So during the qualitative and the quantitative research and the keyword analysis, we have found that there is a main competitor out there. It's called Peachy. Peachy is also a fictional company. So don't go out there and buy Peachy stock yet. So Peachy, we have found in our fictional research that Peachy owns 40% of share of search. Like, wow, everybody wants to go to Peachy. It seems like this seems to be like one of the only choices people go to. It's very represented for them. It's very, there's a huge brand awareness for Peachy. This is definitely their main competitor, their main rival. But we have also found in the qualitative research that there's a main alternative. There's a job to be done for the ideal customer of Scooti, and that is a mountain bike. Right? When we asked the ideal customers in the interview, so what else would you do to have a fun outdoor adventure? And they say, oh, I would take my bike out, go to the mountains, and have a wonderful time there. So it seems that there is an obvious competitor, more of a rival, that is Peachy. And there's also an alternative to what Scooti is out to do, and that is actually a mountain bike. So if you then look at the brand and what is associated with it in different axes here, we're looking from fun to function, from high maintenance to low maintenance, and ask people how they would place those different competitors. This is where we end up. So we have in the quadrant of fun and high maintenance, we have a mountain bike. And it's super fun to use a mountain bike, but it's actually super expensive, and you need repairs all the time. You need storage for your mountain bike. You need to take care of your mountain bike. It's actually quite high maintenance to do that. And on the other end, you have high maintenance and function. This is where a car comes in, or an SUV, for example. This is when we go out for adventure style riding on the weekends. High maintenance, super expensive, super high maintenance SUV, but also very functional type of vehicle. And then on the bottom right quadrant, we have low maintenance and function, something that is very cheap, very accessible, and is very functional. And this is where both the competitors are. I mean, Peachy is, and also Scooti as our brand, we see they're all here in the same quadrant, just as walking. Walking is just even cheaper than the rentable e-scooter. And what we find here in this analysis is, wow, this is crowded. This is a crowded, competitive space when we look at it like that. Like, of course, this is not gonna work, Christina, because you're all competing in the same quadrant with a market leader that is very, very strong already. So how is this gonna work? It's not gonna work. And if you have already developed some strategic, the strategic eye, you see an opportunity here. And the opportunity is in the bottom left quadrant. This is where fun and low maintenance happen. There is nobody playing there right now. There's no other alternative that is in this quadrant. There's no other rival and competitor playing in this field. So this is the market opportunity that Christina then decides to go to. She wants to play in the area of fun and low maintenance, easy, accessible, cheap kind of vehicle that people can use. And this is where she makes a strategic decision to move Scooti to Scooti 2.0 in a different place. Also, she's done some amazing work of laddering. She looked at, in the customer research, it constantly came up, especially when she talked to Southern Germans over 30. They kept saying that they found peachy was too juvenile. Like, oh, they don't really get the appeal. It's a peach colored scooter. It looks like it is for kindergarteners that don't really get it. And this is the beauty of having a niche. And if you ask everybody about how they see it, the alternatives, you're not gonna get to this point. But because you have niche down and found a very specific segment, and then ask them about their opinion, this is when you can actually ladder against it. So they said that peachy was too juvenile, and they also said that a mountain bike for them is too expensive. And so Scooti then takes those weaknesses and turns them into strengths. So instead of peachy being too juvenile, you can now say, oh, Scooti, it's for grown-ups, and take that weakness and turn it into a strength. And also, instead of the mountain bike being too expensive, Scooti is rent by the minute. Super cheap, right? It starts with 50 cents. So it's a super affordable, super accessible vehicle. So that's how Christina then successfully laddered her scooter company against the competition. And then lastly, she went into looking and sounding differently and did an analysis of how well known the distinctive brand assets of her competitors are compared to hers. We found that, oh, peachy is not just super famous, but also super unique. People identify the peachy colors from everywhere and can successfully say, oh, that's peachy. So they're doing a really good job. Unfortunately, Scooti has not been doing a really good job in her analysis. They rarely ever recognize the Scooti brand assets, and can very rarely say that it's actually Scooti. It does not help that those two rivals have very similar sounding names also, and also have like similar shades of red or orange here. It's confusing to the customers, and they don't really see how they're different. So Christina also makes an executive decision to work on the distinctive brand assets of Scooti to move them more towards fame and uniqueness. And how she does that, and what the end of the story here is, that's for another day. And just as a little summary for now, before we go into questions, differentiation, this is what I would advise you to do. This is your winning strategy. Niche down, find product market fit, find the perfect alignment of your company, what makes you unique, what drives you, what is your story, and what is their story. Find an opportunity, an underserved segment of the market, and radically niche down and focus on just them. And then you go ahead and ladder against the competition. You find the alternatives and also the real rivals in the market, and identify their weaknesses and turn them into your strengths. And then you do the work of looking and sounding differently. Look at your visual brand assets, not subjectively, right? Not because, you like a certain color, but look at it as a researcher. Look at it from, is it recognizable enough? Is it unique enough? Would people recognize this color again? Or would they then say that it is us? Does our name come to mind? And do that work and create something that goes against the cliches and really is brave enough to stand out in a crowded market where everybody tries to be one thing. You have to be the other thing. So that is the work to be done for differentiation and not to get out competed. That's enough for me for right now. I would love to go into questions.